Welcome back to our Idea Launch series. Our goal here is to help you create better software products. This is episode 6. In the last episode, we wrapped up the discover stage, talking about getting the whole team aligned, talking about what features we're going to build. In this episode, we're going to jump into the build phase and talk about the process of creating your software product. My name is Darrin Grove. I'm the founder of TrueFit. My background is software development. Joining me today is Dominick DeStasio. Dom is TrueFit's COO and actually the guiding force behind the process that we use here at TrueFit to create software products. Welcome, Dom.
Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks. Why don't we start with a recap? We've talked about this in previous episodes, but let's recap kind of who is on a cross-functional product development team. What are the roles?
Sure. So for our teams, we have a product owner, designer, architect, 2 to 3 engineers, and a quality assurance person that's doing all the testing, making sure everything's solid.
So in kind of for folks who like, I think those are common agile roles, but for folks who that may not be familiar with those roles, what's a product owner do?
So product owner is an official Scrum role. For us, it's a little bit different than it is defined officially in Scrum. It's project management and really product ownership, making sure that our clients understand the features that are being built, the purpose behind them, helping them make good, solid product decisions, looking at the product as a whole, right? So all the big components that need to go into a successful software product. Got it.
And then a lot of different types of designers out there. On our product teams, kind of what do designers do?
All product design. Our designers are full product designers. They do UX, UI, research. So they're have all the skills necessary to really help our clients make sure that the user's needs are met and the user is at the center of everything we're building.
Yeah, exactly. I did like what John said in a previous episode, talking about really the whole team is part of the design process.
Yep.
So we really believe that each person brings an expertise and a voice, and that informs a more robust definition of the product. So that's great. So software architects, what do?
They make sure that the code is sound, right? So there's a lot that goes into building a software product that can be scalable, meet the needs of the user, be something that somebody can build on top of for a long time to come, and be flexible enough because in our process we're often trying to find exactly what product market fit looks like. So the product needs to be flexible, needs to be able to adapt, but at the same time needs to have a really strong architecture at the core. Not uncommon that we run into products that other people build where the architecture of the code wasn't really well thought through and things are just kind of tacked on, and they get down the road and they think they found product market fit, but what they have under the hood is something that kind of needs to be completely and totally rebuilt because there wasn't a lot of attention to the architecture from the outset.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to software architecture, I feel like there is a balance that we try to strike. We talked in the last episode about starting with something small. And kind of where are those lines in your mind around like how much to architect versus how much to invest in architecture versus like, is it possible to over-architect the solution?
I think it's certainly possible to over-architect a solution. I think the answer to that is going to vary dramatically based on the product that we're building. Some products, have a pre-existing domain and, you kind of know where you're going. Other products, it's, you're really, grasping, trying to figure out exactly where it's going to go. So you have to make those calculations. And I think, we talked a little bit about the product owner. As a whole, the team is working together, and the architect obviously has a major part in that. One of the big pieces for our product owner is helping the client kind of understand what some of those trade-offs are and make good decisions about where to spend the money, how deep to go in the architecture early versus, things that we want to find out later with the understanding that may, come with more or less rework depending on, the situation. So for us, everything that we do is really business, contextualized. What's the best thing for the business? What's the best thing for the product? We pride ourselves on helping our customers make those decisions along the way with good information.
So then you have developers on the team, you have testers on the team, and that rounds out a cross-functional product development team in our world.
Yep.
There are other folks that other roles that kind of influence the product development role? What are some of those key roles that you might think of? Okay, outside of the core product development team, what else has an influence on product direction?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's another one of those things that can vary a lot depending on the customer, but I would say, kind of at the core of it, there's always somebody in a, kind of key product management role for the client who's making product decisions, has the authority to make decisions, to spend money, to, say this is the direction we're going to go with the product. We're going to worry about this. We're not going to worry about these things right now. That can take different shapes. Sometimes that's the entrepreneur with the idea, and it's a really small team, and they're playing that role. Other times it can be a little bit of a bigger company, and it is somebody that's more of a dedicated product manager for the team that's maybe working with a group of stakeholders on that side inside the company to help them make good decisions and be aligned along the way, which is really helpful for us when that's the case. So that's definitely one that's there. Sales is another one. We're often trying to get market feedback. We do a lot ourselves for that, but it's also important that our customers are working and talking to their customers throughout the process. And as they're doing that, we're helping, kind of inform where we're taking the product, what's coming up next, and inform their sales strategy. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. There is that really rich feedback loop when you're doing customer development or selling the product early, getting those market insights, testing the market. There's a great feedback loop with the product development team there. So we highly encourage that. So in our last episode, we ended discovery with a release plan, a product roadmap, prioritized features. And now we're ready to actually start to unpack those, start to build those features in code. How does all that work get organized? What's a process look like? What's a day in the life, week in the life look like on the product development team? A lot of the folks that we work with are creating a software product for the first time, and they've never experienced this. So what's the daily, weekly rhythm look like creating a new product?
Sure. So, I guess a couple things to set the stage. Coming out of release planning, we've already got a high level understanding of how we're going to prioritize the backlog and how we're going to phase the release to get the product to market in the best way possible given that circumstance. Now, even in release planning, that breakdown and that prioritization is still at a reasonably high level. We're not going to spend a bunch of time going down to every little detail that we would need to build a feature that may not happen for a couple months or whatever the case might be. So we've already got a little bit of the prioritization coming out of release planning. And really from there, what we're going to start to do is work down that list and dig deeper, right? So the things that are at the top of that list that we're prioritizing to build first, team's going to get together. They're going to do, so we work in 1 week sprints, generally speaking. We do a review with the client every 2 weeks. So every 2 sprints, just for the sake of cutting down meetings. But we're going to have a sprint planning session where we're taking those items that are at the top of the list, coming out of release planning and breaking them down and making sure that we understand the details below that of what actually needs to happen to build that. So, any feature in release planning may get broken down into, 2, 3, 5, 10 other, what we call user stories to actually get completed, right? So there's lots of different components. What we don't want to do is, take the whole thing and say, all right, we'll talk to you in a month when we get, this giant feature done. Right. We break it down into pieces that we can build along the way. Those pieces fit inside of a 1 week sprint. And inside those sprints, the software is being built, peer reviewed, tested. So coming out the other side, what we have at the end of that is a piece of usable, tested software. Now, it may not be complete. It might just be a portion of it. But we've got, an increment of that larger feature that is coming out the other side that is usable, tested, kind of solid and ready to go. There may be rework that happens, later on as the rest of the pieces are built and fit together. But we're making progress on that we're able to put in front of our customers so they can see it and start to get a feel for how this thing is coming together. So at a high level, we're working off that prioritization that's come out of release planning. Now there's always, some other pieces. We want to make sure that the team is full and all the rest of it. So it's not always perfect. It's not always everything at the top. Sometimes we're, laying some groundwork for some other things that are going to happen to make best use of the team. But in general, we're building off of that release plan that we started with, and we measure and learn as we go. And if that release plan needs to change, then we tweak it. But we're working down that list in priority.
Yeah, awesome. One of the roles we did not talk about a minute ago is the role of Scrum Master. What's a Scrum Master do, and kind of what's a daily rhythm look like?
So Scrum Master is really making sure that the team is operating efficiently, right? So we talked a lot about the product owner, and the product owner is working closely with the customer and the market and the team to make sure that we build the right thing, that we're building the right product and putting the right product in market. The Scrum Master is really helping the team from an operational standpoint to make sure that they're running well, that there aren't blockers that are getting in their way, basically doing whatever needs to be done to make sure that the team is operating efficiently.
One of the interesting parts to this, and we hear a wide variety of approaches to this, but when it comes to estimating how big any particular story or feature is, I think the process is fascinating, but I don't think a lot of people know how you actually determine how big a story is, how it actually gets estimated in real life.
Yeah, so I think one of the things I talked about earlier is how we break things down as we go, right? So the earlier you are in the development of a product, the more margin of error you're going to have in estimating,
the more unknowns there are.
The more unknowns there are.
You
just don't know. You haven't gotten into the detail level of everything yet. As you go, as we break that stuff down, that picture gets a lot more clear, right? So the key thing about estimating for us is it happens the whole time. Just because we don't know enough doesn't mean we can't estimate. We have to estimate. We have to do our best job to estimate what it's going to be throughout and refine that estimate as we go. So as we're breaking things down, we're continuing to estimate. And a lot of that is based on, what we think the complexity of something is going to be that we bring. We're bringing years of experience through, thousands of products that we've built to be able to say, okay, here's the complexity that we think, is underpinning this particular story.
Who estimates the story? Is it the architect who has kind of laid out all the groundwork? Is it the engineer? How do you figure out what the right answer is? So
again, I think there's different levels. Early on, it might just be an architect that's giving an estimate for kind of high level planning purposes. But when we get into the sprints, the team is estimating together, and it's as much about the conversation that's coming out as a part of estimating as it is the actual number, because you're going to have one person, hey, what happens?
Somebody says this is really hard. Somebody says this is really easy.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's hard?
Or the inevitable, what about this edge case that nobody thought about,
right.
In this particular situation? And so it's really a team effort. And we try to do that in a way that, everybody feels comfortable giving an estimate, and one person's not persuading another person about what the number should be. Because really we're trying to get to the real answer and the why behind that, so that we can have good discussions. Because there may be ways, there's always ways to either make a feature more complex or less complex with trade-offs, right? So having that conversation as a group, figuring out what we think it's going to take based on what we know, and then having good conversations with clients about some of those edge cases and how they want to handle it. Is it a thing that we want to do now, or is it a part of a story that maybe we want to break off, make lower priority, and we can come back to that later in the project if time budget allows, right? Maybe it's not the most important thing to do at the moment.
So there's really a lot of moving parts coming out of a sprint and breaking down a feature into stories. You have an interesting vantage point on all of this because you have responsibility for multiple teams, and you're kind of watching the performance of those teams. How do teams measure their progress? How do they know if they're doing well, not doing well? How do you measure the progress of a team?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of answers to that. It's not any one thing. So one measure for us is the quality of what we're putting out. Obviously, quality, we've talked about it, is baked into our process from the get-go. So not having a lot of bugs, not having customers that are finding things after the fact where the product wasn't solid. It's not necessarily a measure of progress, but it's a measure of success for us and our teams. We have a very, very high bar on the quality and the stability of the products that we're putting out. So we're also obviously looking at, are we keeping track? We've got a certain time window for a project and we've got a certain number of story points that we've got to produce. Like, are we on pace with where we need to be for the product? Now, that in and of itself, I think, has to get married with quality and other things, because you can fool yourself into thinking that you're going really fast, but you know, kind of pushing problems to the back end. And that's one of the major reasons that we don't count points as done until like they're done. They've been tested. We've got stuff rolled out, right, and we feel good about it. You see a lot of teams that, you know, it looks good, the numbers look good, the metrics are there, but then nothing gets delivered. So we try to take a holistic view to measure progress.
In terms of the number of points, so this all sounds super smooth so far. We're working in weekly sprints, and we're plowing through the product backlog. What happens when we get 2 or 3 or 4 sprints in, and all of a sudden there's a new piece of information that impacts the release plan? What happens then?
I mean, I think, first of all, I would say we expect that to happen. It is very much, you know, build, measure, learn. We know, I mean, it's a core tenet of Agile that as you build, as you move, you're going to uncover things, and the product needs to be able to respond to that change, and the team needs to be able to respond to that change. So it's not an uncommon thing. It does happen. You know, that's where the product owner comes into play with the rest of the team. You know, they're going to figure out what is the priority of that. Sometimes things happen and come up, and it's like, yeah, that's great, but we can worry about that in the next version of the product. It's not a thing that we need to deal with now. Other times it could be a more substantial change, and we have to deal with it and address it. And, you know, that it really becomes a matter of, you know, planning, working through with the customer to say, okay, given that change, where are we going to, you know, fit that in? Our goal actually is to uncover those changes sooner rather than later. The further into a product build you are, and you're learning about, you know, substantial changes, the more costly that can be. So to the extent that we can, that's kind of why we put stuff in front of users early in discovery. And, you know, as we're building stuff, we may continue to put things in front of a customer so that we can get that feedback. And ideally kind of bring that to the surface sooner rather than later. There's always business reasons why that's not always possible, right? Like sometimes the market changes and we can't do anything about that. And so it's just really a matter of figuring out what the impact of that is, and then reprioritizing the backlog. You know, it's kind of a core tenet of Agile. Like, we don't come out of release planning and say, here's the plan, we're good, and never change it again.
Right.
We have to be paying attention to, you know, what we're learning along the way, and adjusting the backlog and adjusting the plan to make sure that we're, you know, not just following the plan off a cliff. We're really trying to end with a successful product in the market.
And we have to adapt, because the world is going to change. If it takes us 2, 3, 4 months in product build, stuff is going to change, and we want to be reacting to all of that. I do remember the example that keeps coming to mind while you're saying that is the client that we worked with on the large order management system, and midway through the build, a competitor released a new product, and we had to make a decision together. Like, are we going to integrate with that other solution, or are we going to duplicate that other solution? And I think we made a good decision to actually integrate with the other solution. That saved all kinds of money in the process. But that's an example. That's a dramatic example, because this whole feature set we were planning is actually just been delivered by somebody else.
I mean, those things happen. When you say we made a good decision, I think the important part about that is that was a decision that we made, you know, with our client at that time.
Right.
I mean, we're working together trying to help them understand the pros and the cons of each potential answer to that situation, and where the risks and the upside, the business, you know, upside to each potential, you know, response, where those are, and, you know, making a good, sound business product decision together, and really making sure that there's no surprises, right? So when something like that happens, you know, we want to make sure that we're communicating that really well at the time, and making sure that our client understands what the implications are. It's not something we want to keep anybody in the dark about.
Yeah. While we're talking about these kind of changes that can come up, what are some of the trickier parts what are the exceptions? What are the trickier parts to get right about this? When it's not just, we're the team's sprinting along and doing great and knocking out the backlog. Like, what are some of the curveballs?
Almost all the curveballs, not all of them, but I would say almost all of them deal with third-party dependencies, whether it be a third party that we're using to integrate with, you know, kind of in the example that you just gave, or a hardware vendor, or, some kind of manufacturer of a wearable or whatever. When it becomes a third-party dependency, the only thing we can do is really one, as we're looking down the backlog, we talk about how we're working on, the most important features first, but we also have to look further out and say, okay, what are the things we're going to need to be working on that could become blockers and maybe have dependencies where we can't completely control it? How do we lay the groundwork ahead of time to make sure that that partner, the customer, whomever, is kind of doing the prep work to make sure that when the team gets there, we're able to keep moving. So we do try to neutralize some of that by kind of looking out ahead, not too far, right? We don't want to do things that are unnecessary, but we're trying to look ahead and say, okay, where are the snags that could be coming up on the road ahead? How can we try to mitigate those by doing some prep work or alerting a customer that hey, we need you to do this by this date, or a vendor that trying to do some of the prep work. So that's where it gets a little bit sloppy at times, and it's not sloppy, but it's not exactly perfectly all the highest priority features at the top, right? Because we do have to kind of look down and also make sure that we're able to keep moving smoothly. But I would say third-party dependencies definitely are the hardest part because we don't really have control.
Right.
We can try to do the prep work and we can make sure that everybody's on the same page. And when those snags happen, we can adapt. We can find other areas in the product if it's, let's say, one of the major features involves an integration and we're totally blocked on that and just can't do anything. There's always other parts of the product that we can build. That just might mean we're deviating a little bit from, the notion of building the most important, highest risk.
The pure priority.
Yeah, right. And that's a conversation we would have with the customer to make sure that they understand the trade-off. And I think in, small doses, that's totally fine, normal, happens all the time. The risk is when that starts to become a prolonged, protracted problem. And you just have to, kind of weigh what the risks are and make sure that we're communicating them well along the way.
Yeah, earlier in the conversation, you said something that I think is key. So when you have this product backlog, you have high-level features or epics, you only get into the details on the ones that are on the top of the list. And one of the reasons that we do that, and you alluded to this earlier, is because all this stuff at the bottom of the backlog can change. that can all be influenced. So don't spend your time working through all the details of stuff that could change anyway, could get deprioritized, so that's a way that this works for overall efficiency, I think.
Yeah.
And flexibility.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we can't just say we're not going to worry about those things at all, because we do need to know enough about them to be able to say we think it's going to cost about this much to do this type of functionality, or here's where it fits into the product, or here's where it solves the user need in certain areas. So we do have to pay attention to it. We try to make sure that we're not going deeper than we need to at any point in time, to your point, because something could change.
Right.
And then all that work that we've done goes out the window anyway.
Yeah, that's good. So if you had to kind of summarize this into some key takeaways, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about the process that they want to use?
Build a process, work with somebody who expects change, and has a process that is geared around keeping you in the loop and making sure that you don't have surprises, right? Like, it's just a fact with product development. Unless you're doing something where you're just stamping out an existing product that is already there and you're not worried about learning from users and improving the market or whatever, you're going to learn stuff. Things are going to change. Things are going to happen. The market's going to shift. Your business situation is going to shift. You have to be able to adapt to that. So, having a partner that is, expecting everything to be exactly the same and everything's fixed and, they're not geared to actually respond to that change and help you understand, right? Because I think, for us, it's as much about making sure that our clients understand the decisions that are being made and they're, empowered and a part of that process, with making those decisions for their business, right? Because at the end of the day, this is their business, their product that we're trying to help them with. So we need to spend the time to make sure that they don't have surprises. They understand why these things are happening, that that a lot of this is normal and does happen along the way. So a lot of it is educational. And to me, I think part of the process and part of working with clients and them understanding that is getting them to a place where they do kind of know how to respond to some of those changes through working with us, because that's going to happen later. I mean, they're going to deal with it. It's not a thing that just happens in the first part of the build. It's regular, especially today. I mean, software's changing so fast. Markets are changing so fast. You have to be able to respond to that change.
Right. So expect change, have a structured process. That's awesome. Thanks, Tom. It's awesome conversation. And thank you for joining us. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and share it with a friend who might be working on a new software product. If you have an idea for a new software product, we'd love to hear about it. And who knows, maybe we'll feature it on an upcoming episode. So please reach out to us on the website at truefit.io. And please join us for our next episode where we are going to dig into some technical details, talk about R&D, maybe talk about some code. We're going to have some fun and get nerdy in the next episode. So hope to see you there.